We're never more excited here than when something comes up that we don't know the answer to. And that's where the sort of sparks of energy, that's where the adrenaline comes from, is not knowing whether an idea you've just had is going to be possible, but knowing that you can go out and find the answer to that. It can also lead to some quite terrifying moments when you're going into very big or even very small, high pressure live performance environments, and you're not entirely sure if the thing that you're about to put in front of an audience is necessarily going to work. And I don't necessarily mean in terms of stability of the technology, I mean whether it works creatively or conceptually, whether you're trying something which you might think is a really great idea, but the rest of the world might not necessarily agree with you. '59 Productions is a company that was set up specifically to explore new ways of using technology in live performance to tell stories. And we're very interested in finding ways of kind of drawing out things about pieces of work that haven't necessarily been seen or heard before. What we really look for when we're looking for potential new partners, collaborators, employees and so on is people who don't necessarily have a very particular artistic or technical skill, but have a real excitement and interest in the creative industries almost as a whole. So we tend to end up working with people who are much more artistically inclined and therefore much more globally interested in the conceptual development of a project. And that's, I think, why we can offer a sort of fairly unique process.
There weren't really mentors to be found, I don't think, because I think we didn't know what we were doing, so we wouldn't have known who to ask for advice.
My personal background is quite mixed. I went to art college straight out of high school. After that I went and studied English literature at university, and I think that is where the sort of company obsession with narrative and storytelling is from.
My background has nothing to do with projection design at all. I studied English at university and met Leo. We were starting out working on a magazine together actually, and I was involved in the photography side of that, and he was designing the magazine. And then some opportunities came up to get involved in creating some content for a theatre production, and things just really evolved from there. I don't really think that either of us really intended to end up doing what we're doing now.
We like to talk about the way we address a new project, and whenever we try and describe it in a sort of official capacity, we say that these commissions or these briefs or these ideas will come in and we'll sit down and discuss them. In a way that's what happens, but actually the reality is much more complicated than that, because an idea will sort of spark off a series of thoughts which may happen over a period of time, and you may have had a discussion with someone which you don't have an immediate response to, and it's not until something else intersects with that, like you go see another piece of theatre, or you listen to a piece of music, or you read about this amazing new technology on the internet or something, and you suddenly piece those two items together and you get that kind of spark of inspiration, I suppose. So what we try and do, and we're getting better at it, is create an environment in which those ideas can sort of arise reasonably organically. And if that means not spending the afternoon in the office brainstorming around a piece of A2 paper and a bunch of permanent markers, then all the better. It might mean going to an art gallery or having a conversation with a composer or doing something totally unorthodox. And that tends to be when our best ideas arise, is when you apply a non-standard process to a non-standard problem.
It's difficult to say what the greatest challenge we've had is, because every single project really does present its own particular set of problems. Quite often a director or a designer will have an idea which on the surface of it sounds completely lunatic, like there's simply no way that it could be achieved. So it's very exciting to be sort of given an idea by a director or a designer and to have to try and figure out whether or not there's any sort of practical solution to making it work.
Things like Warhorse, for example, which has gone from a almost surefire commercial failure at the National Theatre in London and turned into this sort of global smash hit touring show. And the conversations we were having as a creative team before that about, well, you know, it's a tough job, but at least we know we'll never have to do it again, have been proven so entirely wrong on such a number of levels. But no one thought that that was going to work because we were putting together such a diversity of different theatrical techniques, technological techniques, storytelling techniques. But because of this sort of purity of the idea and the skills of the people involved, it actually turned into something totally remarkable.
Being involved in the opening ceremony of the Olympic Games was obviously terrifying, and you know, a one night only event, very, very, very high pressure, and ultimately thrilling, ultimately absolutely worthwhile. Both Leo and I have got a very warm memory of working on Satyagraha, which was a Philip Glass opera that we did first at the ENO and then went on to do at the Met. But I think there are elements from every production which are very, very pleasing, and you might just do one cue in the whole show, which is something that you're extremely proud of that no one will notice, or no one will know is there, but you're very proud of how it works. I don't think that anybody really does this for critical or sort of award recognition. I think those moments when you've set yourself a challenge and you've pulled it off and you've done something which you're really proud of, I think that's kind of all you can ask for, really. People, when they hear about video projection for theatre, the image in their head is probably of a big, horrible screen at the back of a stage with trees projected onto it or sky or whatever. And sure, there's always a bit of that involved, but actually some of the most successful work that we've done has involved integrating projection into other scenic elements. We did a production for Yonsei from Sigur Rós, which had a physical set that we designed, but you know, at certain moments appeared to fill up with water. And I think, you know, there were moments within that show where you couldn't quite tell what you were looking at, whether is this a projection or is this a physical effect or is this a lighting effect.
Quite often the character in our work isn't necessarily a human person. If we're working on something like the Sydney Opera House, for example, the character becomes the building, and how we explore that and communicate something that's still emotional and dramatic and has a journey to it becomes in a way a sort of a different challenge to what you might have if you were making a film or a theatre piece about a human character or a human narrative. We've been developing a technique which we've come to call live cinema, which is about working with live actors on a theatre stage, but bringing video cameras and live projection relay into that. The idea is that we create something which is very much like a feature film, has the same sort of qualities and aesthetic as a feature film, but is made in front of the audience's eyes. And what that gives you as a member of the audience in a normal theatre is incredibly close access to the performer, to the emotion, to the detail of their performance, in a way that you might get in a film, but without the experience of it being done in front of you, without the nightly experience of the risk and the adrenaline of it being genuinely live. Technology answers our prayers on any number of days. On the other hand, you know, it causes us enormous headaches, as anyone who uses technology, especially on the bleeding edge, will find that you're constantly using things which aren't quite ready to do what you want them to do.
Technology isn't going to completely solve any dramatic questions. It's not inherently interesting. It's only interesting if it's serving a bigger purpose, which is to tell a story in a more interesting and a more involved way. The thing that we are quite keen to avoid is the temptation to try and do things, technologically speaking, just because it's possible. So whilst technology might open up new visual and interactive possibilities, it's really, really important to keep the focus on the act of storytelling, because that's something that's endured for thousands of years in a way that theatrical technology, it evolves, but it doesn't make a bad piece of work good.